I figured I would start with looking at the Medium Freighter from Escape Velocity. This, of course, is an add-on ship. It doesn't come with the game. You have to get it off of Ambrosia's website and do the port that I explained in a previous video. I'm seriously considering a re-release of all this stuff in a compatible form for Escape Velocity Nova, and I actually am a little bit unsure about what the copyright and so on would be on that. I'm not sure. This was all freeware content originally, and I've made a point of making it as close to the original as possible, especially this one. And this is part of the problem, of course, because if you look at its price, actually it's more than I thought it was. It's more than an Argosy. 850,000 credits, which means that the rental commission would be 85,000, your rent would be 8,500, which is too much, probably. It's got cargo capacity 400, so if you add some protection to it, shield upgrades or whatever, then that could come down as well. And it's not invincible by any means. 200 shields, 200 armor. That's not so bad, but it's also not great either. It is much better than a bulk freighter, though. So this ended up being my model for the Alpaca. It's only got 600 fuel. That's another disadvantage. And it's slow, but that's to be expected. So it's got a crew of 15. So I basically took all of these specifications and I downgraded them, essentially. I'm not sure what else there is to say about that. I think we should take a look at the sprite, though, because initially I actually used the sprite as a template, but I ended up using the bulk freighter in the end because I found the same old problem I've often found with Escape Velocity sprites, is that they're so exacting you can end up with them overlapping. So we'll jump over to that now. First of all, it's necessary to look at how the sprites are executed or implemented in Escape Velocity Nova. You need a separate shan file, you see here. That's what it's called, a shan, which assigns the sprite separately from the sprite file itself. For some reason, the sprite file and the ship file don't specify what sprite will be used, so you have to separate the whole, I don't know what you would call it, the whole reference out to these files. So you put in the number of frames which are going to be in the sprite, which you can vary. Actually, there's some choice there. And then the resource ID of the sprite. Now, the base image is basically the sprite you build. It used to be, in the old days of Escape Velocity, that you needed to also make a separate mask file. But Escape Velocity New, or EVNew, which is this editor, does that for you. So that's a nice upgrade, if that's the best word to use. And then this is, I think in theory, the base X and base Y is supposed to indicate pixels size, but I found this doesn't necessarily correspond to the size of this sprite. I'm actually a little bit surprised by that, but that seems to be the case. Now, if you're familiar with games editing, this is obviously where the weapons of the ship would fire from. So gun position, turret position, guided position, beam position. I'm going to copy all of these to the Alpaca, actually. I did, in fact, because the Alpaca is complete. Now, we'll go to the sprite. So this is what the sprite looks like. I'm a little bit surprised by all of it in terms of how less user-friendly this whole thing is compared to EVEdit. All of this would be accessible from the ship file in EVEdit. So I'm just reiterating my feeling let down by the way this has all been structured. But it is what it is. So you can see the medium freighter which would have originally been some kind of 3D model. I don't know if this one was done in Bryce or not, but they started in one position with the light coming from a particular angle. Then they turn it, turn it, turn it, and so on. So we have a 6x6 sprite. And of course it's going to turn 360 degrees. Now, originally I was hesitant about how many degrees I should turn it in each step. However, the math of these sprites is hiding in plain sight. Obviously, if you have to turn the ship 360 degrees, and you have 36 frames, you will turn it 10 degrees each time. No guesswork involved at all, actually. Very simple. And that might be why so many of these sprites are 36 frames. It doesn't provide you with the smoothest, I don't know, animation, certainly. But it is very easy to calculate. It's just 10 degrees each time. So how would you do that? Well, you would leave your light source in the 3D graphics program stationary. And then you would turn each time that you render. So you would render 36 frames separately. And then you would scale the rendered images into a sprite. And what I did, of course, was I used this as a template. In the end, I regretted it, and I ended up using the larger bulk freighter sprite as a template, which didn't harm me at all, actually. It worked out just fine. And the way to do this, of course, is that you would layer your new sprite over the old one in an image editor like Photoshop or GIMP. And that should suit you just fine. I'll show you that in a minute. Now, oh yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. There's the mask. And as I said, years ago, this would be a separate thing that you would have to make. And making it match perfectly was not always easy. In the case of EVNew, it'll do it for you automatically. So when you look up here, when you import your sprite, it will also create the mask for you, which is great. Although, for some reason which I'm not clear on, if you import a sprite, the next sprite, if you replace it, if you come up with a better sprite, it has to be exactly the same dimensions, down to the pixel. And so I've often found myself completely changing the sprite file altogether, which I did have to do in this case because I ended up using the larger bulk freighter sprite. Now, if we look at how all this works with the Alpaca, that's the next step, I suppose. But that will be in the next video. So I'll see you there.